Now that we've seen how the route is determined in the sales order, let's have a look at the option of redetermining the route when we create the delivery. It is an option, so you don't have to use it, and if you don't use it, when you create the delivery, the system will just copy the route from the sales order to the delivery. However, if you do turn on the route redetermination, we would want to use the weight groups. So if I go to shipping, routes, route determination, and define weight groups, as you can see here, I have different groups, and it's basically just a range. So as you can see here, I have weight group 01, 02, 100, 9999, and they are all up to a particular range. So now let's have a look at the configuration behind the weight group 1, 10, 100, and 99. So it's quite simple actually. What you do is for each unit of measure, for each weight group range, yeah, you define the maximum it can have. And you can see here the unit of measure here is grams. So the weight groups to the maximum of a particular range expressed in grams. So weight group 10 is the same as the kilogram. So you can see here, if I have a look, if you look at, oops, let me go back in. So weight 10, here you can see 10 is in 10,000 grams, and the tonnage for 10 is 0.01 ton. And in kilograms, here it's, oops, let me just take this out, it's a bit confusing. Unselect all of them. So you can see here for weight group 1, it's 1 kilo. Right, so maximum is until 1 kilo. Weight group 10 is from 10 is the maximum of 10 kilos or 10,000 grams. So there's a different weight unit of measures there. Or 0.01 tons. So they're all the same, just expressed in different units of measures. Yeah, so that is just in case the sales orders have different units of measures. Now, if we look at 100, it's the same: 100,000 grams, 100 kilograms, or 0.1 tons. And the way the weight group works is that the system will say, okay, I have a weight. In which band does it belong to? Yeah, so it looks at the lowest band and say, is the weight below this band? And if the answer is no, it'll go to the next one, and then it'll say, is it in between the lowest band and the second band? If it's not, then it keeps on going up and up and up. It just looks at a kind of range level, and that is actually how the weight group works. So let's go back out and look. Let's have a look at the route determination again. But this time, let's have a look at the route determination based on weight. So if I put in my customer and my shipping point, I have it here. And let's do the weight. And as you can see, there's no entries. So if I were to create a new entry, oops, not copy, create a new entry, I put in the shipping condition again. The transport group as on the material master, and this time I have the option to put the weight group in. So let's open it up, and as you can see, we have the range of 1 kilo and so forth. So I'll put in the route 00012 and let me fill it up. So while I'm filling it up, what you can see is I'm creating the next range, so 10 kilos, and putting in the same route again and again. So what I'm saying is, for each band of weight, choose this particular route. And even up to 100 kilos, I'm still choosing route 12. And for the shipping condition, as you can see, if I say anything above 100 kilos, 9999, choose the A route. and we press enter. So you can see here the system will always choose route 12 unless the delivery is over 100 kilos, and then it will choose route A000. So let me save this. It's a configuration, so it'll ask me for a transport. I'll save it, and that's it. The next thing to do, let's go back, is to make sure that we redetermine the route when we create the delivery. So it's in this redetermine route by delivery type. As you can see here, you have the option of to redetermine. Let's have a look at the options here. You have blank, or you have A, which is to redetermine without check, and B is redetermine with check. So by default, I usually use option A if I want to redetermine. Let's have a look at LF, and you can see here it's configured to A, new route determination without check. So if I go back out and save that, that means that when I create the delivery, this system will redetermine the route. Now, this final one is the actual route for deliveries, is to allow you to swap routes. If it's left blank, that means you cannot swap the route. If you put it in, that means you can replace a route with another route. It's good to control. So you can say, okay, if I have this range of routes, I can always replace it with another range of routes. And it's used really to control the users, to allow them what to swap. The last thing you want is for the system to automatically determine the route, and the users incorrectly then update the route to something that's not right. So you use this piece of config here to say what they can and cannot replace. Knowing what we know now, let's have a look at the business case with our newfound knowledge of routes and see where it is reapplied. So the point here is, as you can see, the customer is divided into 4 regions, and the freight forwarder is selected based on regions. So let's divide that again. So we have the region of North, we have the region of here South, we have Central, and we have one more region called Midlands. It's actually the Midlands of the UK, that's why it's called Midlands. So 4 regions, and the freight forwarder is selected based on region. So what we are going to say is that for each of these regions, the delivery time is 2 days to the north, Midlands is 1 day, Central is 1 day, and the south of the England is 1 day. So we now have our journey time. And what we are going to do is to say we are going to have 4 routes, 1 for each region, and we're going to call it just simply route 1, route 2, route 3, and route 4. And against each of these routes, we will have a transit time of 1 day each, except for the north, where the transit time is 2 days. Pretty simple, straightforward configuration. We also have a requirement here where parcel shipments of anything less than 10 kilos are shipped by parcels. And what we are going to do is we are going to now configure or redetermine the route at the delivery side. So once we reach lower than the 10 kilos or so, it will go by parcel, and we will create the route parcel 1 for this. Parcel 1 will be our route for anything less than 10 kilos. This brings the total number of routes to 5, 1 per each region, and 1 for anything below 10 kilos. We will assign the journey time or the route time. As you can see, 1 day for all except for the north, which is 2 days. Each route will have its own forwarding agent, and we will turn on route determination when we create the delivery, because we want to use We want to catch anything that's below 10 kilos and reassign it to the route called parcel 1. So as you can see here, this business case uses all of the route determination functionality to manage and to segregate. So by the time we create the delivery, we know where the delivery needs to go, how long it takes, who's going to manage it, and how the logistics process is going to flow. So in the next lecture, let's have a look at how we create the delivery itself. In this video, we'll be looking at a concept called route and route determination in SAP. Over the course of this video, we'll cover why route is important, how you determine the route, and how it's configured, and the properties behind the route. As you can see here in Google Maps, I have plotted two towns. The first is Manchester and the other is London. And I've asked Google to show me the journey or how to get from London to Manchester. It has told me how long it takes, 2 hours. And I can take drive, I can take the train, I can even cycle, in which case cycling takes 17 hours. What's important to take away from this is that for any journey, you have a start and end point. You have how you're going to get there. You have your means of transit, and you also have the duration. And actually in SAP, we will see how a particular route has all of these properties. Now, in SAP, a route is determined on the sales order on each individual item level. So each item could have a different route, or they could have all the same route. Be aware that when you create the delivery, that route is copied onto the delivery header. This means that we could have a scenario where a single sales order could have multiple routes, and when you create a delivery, the sales order would be split across these multiple deliveries, which with each delivery having a different route. Once we have a look at how the route is determined, we can see why a particular item could have a different route. Now, the route is important because it drives quite a number of logistics items. The route is used to determine the lead time or the planning time for that route. For example, if I were to ship from the UK to Australia, that route, the planning of that route could take longer as compared to when I want to plan a route from London to Manchester. The route must have a journey time. So how long does it take to travel on that route? Also, a route could have a picking and packing time that is different from the default. So you could say for a particular route, for example, again, if I wanted to ship from the UK to Australia, because it's such a long journey, it may take me longer to pack the materials as compared to normal. And finally, the route can be used for haulier determination. So you could say against a particular route, I have a particular haulier that I want to use. Thus, we can say that the route is one of the main drivers in how you determine all of the deadlines in logistics. So when do you ship, when do you pick, when do you pack? The route is also used to segregate the documents. You can create in the delivery, or in the delivery creation to be exact, you can select to only create deliveries that belong to a particular route. We'll have a look later why this is important. The route can be also used as part of the selection when you want to create a shipment. And finally, you can have routes to represent a particular logistics scenario. For example, you could have a route that represents normal shipments, a route that could select a particular haulier, or a route that could select a particular process. So returns, in theory, could be one route or one type of route. And if the customer chooses to collect their own product, we could also have a particular route for them. Thus, when we create the delivery or when we assign the shipments, we know that we will always exclude that particular route from all the planning, because we know the customer is going to collect it out themselves. So we can, as you can see here, the route we can use to drive all of these selections in the logistic processes. There's also the option to redetermine the route when you create the delivery. And the only reason you would redetermine the route when you create the delivery is if you use the weight as one of the criteria when you are determining the route. And the reason you do it at the time you create the delivery is that is the only time, or that is the final time, you would know the weight. Because if you were to do it on the sales order, it could be that when you create the delivery, you might have changes to it, maybe due to availability. Or you could have grouped a number of sales orders together into one delivery, and that would change the weight. So the only true time you would know the weight of the delivery is when you create the delivery, or at the time when you create the delivery. So that is why SAP has this option: redetermine the route at the time of delivery creation. And the only time you would do it is if you have route determination by weight. So now, for this sales order in SAP, if I were to go to the item and I go to shipping tab, you can see here is where the route is being determined. And here you can also see I can change the route manually, and I can select any other route that I want. So you can see here, here's a whole list of routes if I ever wanted to, but the system would determine one automatically if it could. The route on the sales order is determined by 4 values. The first value is the transport group, which is determined from the material master. So this value is copied from the material master. The shipping condition, which is originally from the customer master, and it's copied into the sales order. So it's actually taken from the sales order. We have the from transport zone, which is copied from the shipping point in that item. And we have the to transport zone, which is copied from the ship to party. Now, for the purposes of this formula, let's assume that the from transport zone, this one here, and the to transport zone are constant. And what I mean by this is that the shipping condition that you see here and the transport group can be used to drive the route determination based on a particular set of scenarios. So why would you want a different route based on the shipping condition? Now, the route comes from either this customer or the sales order. And so what we can say is that we can use the route in the sales order for either selection, or we can use it to exclude a particular sales order when we process our deliveries. So what I mean by this is, for example, let's say we have a sales order that is for self-collection, which comes from the customer. So what we can say is that every time you create a sales order for this customer, which is self-collection, always have this particular route. And when we create our deliveries, we always create that route last, for example, because there's no lead time. And we can exclude that route when we create our shipments, because it's always self-collection, because we don't need to do any shipment planning on it. Now, in the case of rush order, the shipping condition can be determined on the document type. We'll have a look at this in the configuration. We've seen this before, but we'll have a look at it again. That means that for this particular document type, we always have a particular route. And what we can do is, by having a different route, we can change the process flow. So again, in the example, if we have a rush order, for example, we can always select a particular route so that the lead time is shorter. We can always then choose a very particular haulier. Let's say we can choose a parcel delivery company. And all of that comes just by a particular document type. Because the transport group is derived from the material, what we could effectively say is that the material could drive the route determination. And what we would do is, or what we would want, is to segregate certain materials into a particular route because they require special handling. An example is they could, for example, have a particular material could have a particular route because it would require a cool truck. And other materials may not require that. So what you want to say is, every time you create a sales order for this particular material, choose this particular route, which means I will choose a particular truck and a particular freight forwarding agent. So you can see again how the material drives the route determination, which then drives all the other logistics processes. And finally, one last thing. The route is actually in this function module, which you can access using the transaction SA37. And the module to determine the route is this one here. So if you're ever stuck on how SAP determines the route, use SA37, put in this function module, and you can step line by line, code by code, to see how SAP determines the route. So now let's have a look at how we would configure the routes in SAP. As you can see here, I am in the customizing, but let's go into SPRO. So I'm going to type in the transaction /SPRO. It's the same customizing object. I'm going to the IMG here, and the route configuration is actually in logistics execution, shipping, basic shipping functions, and route. So it's in shipping, basic shipping functions, and route. And when I open it, you can see here define route, route determination, which is how we determine the route. So let's have a look at how we define the route first before we look at how we determine a route. You can see here's the screen here. We have all of the routes and we have various details. There are stages in the routes, but for the purpose here, I'm not going to cover it. That's more used in the shipment functionality. So for the time being, let's have a look at how we would configure route and some of the values in a route itself. So let's go to a particular route and let's have a look. The first thing you'll see on here is the route description. Now, it's important for you to understand that a route has a particular name, and it's important before you start configuring new routes to have an idea on your naming convention. And what I mean by this is that you must have a system where a person looks at that route and instantly knows what it means. So for example, you might say, the first two digits might define the country in which it's shipping into, and the last digit might mean the duration, or some sort of coding like that. So for example, you could have UK 0001, which means that I'm shipping to the UK and it's 1 day delivery time. So before you start creating the routes, make sure you already have in your mind so it's easy to identify the route by its name. We then have the shipping type, the shipment pre-leg and the post-leg, and including the distance here. And all of these values are actually used in the shipping process rather than in the delivery process. So the shipping type and all of these will be pulled in to the shipment based on the route. Next, we have this flag relevant for transport, which means that is this route relevant to be put in a shipment? If you unflag it, then you can't put any deliveries that have this route in a shipment. Particularly useful if you have returns or inbound deliveries or something that you never ever want in a shipment. This is where you would flag it so that it's not, you can't accidentally pull it into a shipment. And finally, we have this value here under scheduling called transit time. Now, transit time actually means how long is the journey expressed in a number of days. And on the side there, you can see the factory calendar, which says how many days are working. So let's take a moment to have a look at how SAP actually uses the transit time, or how it calculates the transit time and determines the dates. So in this calendar, let's assume I have a route, and this route has a 5-day transit time. So 5 days. And what SAP would do is, let's say I ship something on a Monday, it will calculate the Monday to Tuesday, so Monday to Tuesday, as one transit day. And this is the same from Tuesday to Wednesday, so one day, Wednesday to Thursday, Thursday to Friday. So one day, one day, one day here, one day from Thursday to Friday. So as you can see, 4 days, and then Friday to Saturday. That is one more day, which means that the product, which is 5 day, which means the 5-day transit time, which means the product arrives on a Saturday. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So that means that if I were to ship it on a Monday and until Friday, it is 4 days, and the Friday to Saturday is one extra day. Now, that is if Saturday is a working day. Now, what happens if, for example, this weekend, the 13th and the 14th, was a holiday? And this is expressed in the factory calendar that you have. What happened if you ship the product, let's say, on the 8th of December? So 8th to 9th. So it's 2 days. As you can see, 3 days, 4 days. Now, so 1, 2, 3, 4 days. Because it can't deliver on Saturday and Sunday, it actually jumps and tries to deliver it on the Monday. So that will mean 5 days. So see how it jumps over the working days, it jumps over the holidays and only uses the working days to calculate the transit time. And finally, let's assume that middle of the week, as you can see here, Christmas Day and the 24th, let's say it's a holiday, so one day, so the 23rd, the next day is actually 26th, that all is counted as one day, yeah, so the 24th and 25th is a holiday, yep, so the 23rd to 26th is one day, 26 to 27 is one day if the Saturday is a working day, etc. Yeah? So you can see here how holidays or Saturday and Sundays or certain days, if you can't ship something, you put it in the calendar and SAP would skip those days. Before I forget to mention, I just want to revisit this distance, and this distance is actually used in the shipment module either for reporting or shipment cost calculation, because you can calculate the shipment, how much a shipment would cost based on the distance. So we see here, as we saw how we calculated, the transit time is the duration of the route expressed in days. The travel duration is how you express it in hours. Not usually used, but it's there. Next is the planning lead time in days. And if I go next is the planning lead time in hours. Oops, next one. Right. The allowed total weight is just how much weight you would allow on this route. It's not particularly used, and you can like pull that value into a shipment if you wanted to. And finally, here's a factory calendar we talked about, and that's being used when you want to calculate the dates with relevance to the transit time. So now let's say I want to create a new route. So let me go back and let me just put in the route that I want to copy from. 1, 2, press enter. So I select this one, I press the copy, and as you can see, I put in 3 days as a description, and I also put in just an A as the start of my naming convention. I put transit time 3, and I put the calendar you want. Now, you can see here what it does is it asks whether I wanted to copy the route schedule, and by default, I'm just going to say no. As I explained before, the route stages is used more primarily in shipping. I'm not going to cover it here, so I'm going to just say no for now. So if now I go ahead and I save this route, the system will say, give me my transport number. I say yes, that's a transport I've created. So now this transport is done. So here is, I've defined my route. And under route determination, we'll have a look at how we are going to define, or we are going to determine the route. We've created a route, now it's time to determine the route, or put in the rules in order so that when I create the sales order, it now knows how to determine the route. So in the screen, you can see how the system determines the route, either on an order level or on a delivery level. The delivery is by weight also. So let's have a look at our shipping point, 2400, and the destination country, Italy. And what happens when I press enter is the system will look at the shipping point, pick up the departure from and departure zone from the shipping point. It'll use that as its selection, and as you can see, I want the receiving zone 002, which is where my customer is. So if I go in here, let's have a look at the details. I can now see that for this shipping condition and this transport group, so this shipping condition 01, the transport group 0001, I will determine this route for ship from 01 to receiving zone 02. I will have route 12. So let's say I wanted to add a new entry, and I just select all 3. I copy it, and I say my shipping condition is 09. I want it to determine the route I created before. So A00012. Yep. So press enter. Oops, I have to put the shipping condition, sorry. Put the shipping condition here. So this means that, what this means is that when I ship from Italy 0001, where the destination on the customer master is, the transport zone is 002, the shipping condition 09, it will always determine the route A00012. So now I've created my new route entries. Let's go back and let's create a new sales order and try changing the shipping condition and see how this affects the route determination. So I'm going to go to a sales order that I've created before. This is the sales order I've created. So if I go in, If I go to item number 3, you can clearly see the route in the shipping tab. The route is 12. If I go to the header level, if I go to the shipping tab, I can see the shipping condition is 01. So let's change it to 09. The system will then say, do you want to redetermine the route? I say yes. It's doing some redetermination. If I go to item 3, you can see that the shipping point and the route has changed. It has changed to our new route A000012 as we have configured before.